Не то, что в крови, в хромосомном наборе. Бытовая ежедневная коррупция.
He'd be put under investigation.
Rudy Giuliani under fire for his plan to travel to Ukraine and actively push for investigations that could help the president's re-election.
The Ukrainians brought me substantial evidence of Ukrainian collusion with Hillary Clinton.
I think Rudy has been a great crime fighter. He looks for corruption wherever he goes.
The murkiness and corruption of the Ukrainian political system is being weaponized.
It's what could be called kind of shadow politics.
There's no crime. I'm the first person to ever get impeached, and there's no crime.
The impeachment of Donald Trump has divided and captivated the country.
Democrats launching their case against President Trump, arguing he abused his power.
Committee will come to order.
It is a complex tale of corruption and misinformation. It involves Ukrainian tycoons and prosecutors, DC lawyers, diplomats and hustlers. And at the center of it all, the president's old friend from New York.
We're beginning to face the problem of crimes committed by powerful people in business and powerful people in government.
Rudy Giuliani made his name as a hard-charging prosecutor.
I mean, he went after Wall Street corruption. He went after leaders of the mafia, and it seemed like he was everywhere.
He helped lead America through one of its most difficult moments.
He's the mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani.
After 9/11, Giuliani was one of the most beloved men on the planet.
The responsibility of leadership.
He wagered it all in the 2008 presidential race, and he lost. And I think something changed then.
Obviously, I thought I was that person. The voters made a different choice.
America moved on from Giuliani, so he went into business overseas.
Rudy began realizing how much money he could make.
He's receiving legal and consulting fees from all over the world, including the government of Qatar, from Colombia. He has clients in Bahrain, in Turkey, and a number of other countries.
The more these foreign sources need the help of the U.S. government, the more they're willing to pay. He's earning enormous fees from an Iranian dissident political group.
We're going to be in Tehran much sooner than all those cynics believe.
Rudy says he isn't actually doing lobbying, he's doing legal work for clients, and sometimes when we ask him what he's doing, he'll say, can't discuss that, it's a lawyer-client relationship.
One of his clients is now the President of the United States.
I think that when he saw Trump become president, he said, this is a guy who I can work with, and this is a guy who can help me make money.
Long before he represented the president, Giuliani found work in Ukraine, advising businessmen and politicians.
Unlike the governor or the president, you're the one who's held accountable.
There are a number of clients in the former Soviet Union that are interested in his services. This goes back to 2006, 2007 era. That's when he forms his first relationships in Ukraine.
But in 2014, Ukraine entered a new era. A popular uprising forced a strongman from power and exposed corruption throughout the ruling class.
The Ukrainian people stood up for dignity, for rule of law, and against kleptocracy, against authoritative regime.
In the chaos, Ukraine's more powerful neighbor saw an opportunity. Russia annexed Ukrainian territory and orchestrated a rebellion in the east of the country. It was the beginning of a grueling conflict that continues to this day.
This fight for rule of law in Ukraine costs lives. However, millions of Ukrainians show that we are not giving up.
The Obama administration stood behind the new Ukraine. It provided military aid and support for civil society. Vice President Joe Biden was the face of U.S. policy. He made at least 6 visits to the country in 7 years, including a final one just days before Trump took office.
It's imperative that you continue to strengthen all of your anti-corruption institutions, to root out those who would return Ukraine to rule by cronyism and kleptocracy.
It was a delicate time for Ukraine's wealthiest men, known as oligarchs, and they looked for ways to maintain their status.
It's usually the strategy of oligarchs to get access to Western politicians through chain of lobbyists, PR firms, lawyers. And obviously Rudy Giuliani, who is close to President Trump, seems to be a good guy to use in order to pass a message to the senior leadership of the United States.
Giuliani was hired by the city of Kyiv in 2017, appearing with its controversial mayor on trial at the time for kidnapping. The charges were later dropped.
The mayor seems to be loved by everyone.
Giuliani mixed business with charity. In 2018, he linked up with a Ukrainian rabbi to raise money for Anatevka, a village for Jewish war refugees.
Почетным мэром этого села стал Giuliani, поэтому тут уже какая-то была не только благотворительная связь, мне кажется, это были еще какие-то другие связи.
There were two other fundraisers on the project, Igor Fruman and Lev Parnas.
Hi, Moisha.
Moisha, how are you, baby?
How you doing? Here with Rudy, congratulations on the 100th.
I love that picture. I can't wait to come back.
The three men were already working on a much larger project in Ukraine, and it involved the President of the United States. When Igor Fruman was arrested with his business partner in October of 2019, few Americans had ever heard his name. But in the Black Sea port of Odessa, he had a reputation.
Он как раз появился в Одессе в 90-е годы. Поэтому для многих в Одессе до сих пор люди его помнят именно по этой части его деятельности, по шумным вечеринкам, по машинам Майбах и по прочему. Да? Он как бы стал центром светской жизни.
Fruman built a boutique hotel in Odessa. Later, he opened a popular nightclub. One development on public land set off clashes with local activists.
Якщо в них є вплив на офіційні органи влади, якщо в них є достатньо грошей, то тоді вони це роблять. Це звичайна бандитська поведінка. Це тут немає нічого такого надзвичайного.
Для меня Игорь Фруман – это история не про настоящего бизнесмена. Это не тот человек, который делает бизнес по правилам всю свою жизнь. Это скорее про какой-то непрозрачный, темный и мошеннический, возможно, бизнес. Использует свои связи, и это все об этом.
Fruman moved to South Florida in the late 2000s. Eventually, he connected with Lev Parnas, a fellow businessman with roots in Ukraine.
Lev Parnas is a guy who was chasing the American dream. People who've encountered him in the last few years have called him a hustler. They said he kind of seemed to always be looking for an angle, looking for the next deal.
Parnas and Fruman set their sights on Republican Party insiders.
They're giving money to political candidates. At some point in the summer of 2018, they secure a meeting with Rudy Giuliani, and that's the start, as far as we can tell, of the relationship with Giuliani. And it gets very close very quickly.
With their Ukrainian contacts, the two men would soon be useful to Giuliani. But in the meantime, they had their own interests. They were hoping to break into Ukraine's natural gas industry.
Их ощущение было, скорее всего, продиктовано тем, что собой газовый рынок представлял там, когда они еще жили в Украине, действительно был под контролем там олигархов и так далее, и был коррумпированным.
The men connected with a gas tycoon in exile, one of Ukraine's wealthiest and most powerful men. His legal team hired Parnas, paying him hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And he refers to himself to one associate of his in Florida as the world's highest paid translator. So there are these extraordinary alliances and connections. We don't understand them fully yet, but we can see common goals.
One goal was the removal of the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine.
The old oligarch system is still clinging to life, and corruption is its life support.
Marie Yovanovitch was a champion of the anti-corruption movement, and that made her a target. Parnas and Fruman sought out access to her boss.
They give $325,000 to America First, which is the main pro-Trump super PAC. And the two of them are given access to a small roundtable dinner with the President of the United States at the Trump Hotel in April of 2018.
All right, everybody. The President.
Fruman was recording throughout the meal and caught this exchange between Parnas and the President.
So we gotta get rid of the ambassador. She's still left over from the Clinton administration.
Where the ambassador were Ukraine?
Yeah, and she's basically walking around telling everybody, wait, he's gonna get impeached.
The president responds pretty much instantly and quite aggressively to the idea that he's got an ambassador in Ukraine who's not on his side.
Get rid of her.
Hooray.
Okay, get her out tomorrow. I don't care. Get her out tomorrow. Take her out, okay?
Excellent.
Do it.
It would be another year before Yovanovitch was ousted, but the seed had been planted.
I tell you, folks, we're all fighting battles.
Even as a candidate, Trump saw Ukraine as a problem.
As far as Ukraine is concerned, it's a mess. And that's under the Obama's administration. Don't blame Donald Trump for that.
People seem to have been telling President Trump or President-elect Trump that Ukraine is this bad place. It makes perfect sense in his mind that this country, which has a stake against Russia, could have been actually working against him.
He never accepted the findings of U.S. intelligence agencies that Russia had been working to get him elected.
President Putin, he just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
He believed that special counsel Robert Mueller was trying to take him down.
All we hear about is this phony Russia witch hunt. That's all we hear about.
So clearly this was a ripe informational landscape to be manipulated.
According to Vladimir Putin, there had been a conspiracy in 2016, but it was between Hillary Clinton and Ukraine.
В ходе предвыборной кампании в Соединенных Штатах действующая украинская власть заняла одностороннюю позицию в поддержку одного из кандидатов. И больше того, олигархи некоторые с одобрения наверняка политического руководства финансировали этого кандидата.
U.S. officials feared that Putin was telling Trump the same thing in private, as they later told the Washington Post. And they feared Trump was listening.
The Democrats colluded on the Ukraine. So they colluded. And then when you get down to it, why isn't the FBI looking at the DNC server?
On the fringes of the internet, Russian trolls and Trump supporters were amplifying the misinformation, and conservative media ran with it.
Why didn't your news organizations extensively report on Ukrainian collusion?
The president wanted an investigation. In 2018, Trump hired an old friend as his personal lawyer. He was an old investigator with history in Ukraine.
I was seeking, in the best tradition of being a lawyer, a defense lawyer, to vindicate my client.
With the help of his associates, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, Giuliani was on the case. By late 2018, Parnas and Fruman were in Kyiv, holding court at the Hilton International Hotel.
Парнас и Фруман в Украине, они продавали свои связи. И при этом делали это достаточно успешно. То есть это фактически такие предоставление лоббистских услуг, но без чека.
They spent extravagantly at cigar bars and nightclubs, met with Ukrainian officials, and reported directly to Giuliani.
Rudy Giuliani, Lev Parnas, and Igor Fruman were representing the personal political interests of a U.S. president, but also representing at various times unknown financial interests of their own.
Они были как фиксерами для Giuliani. То есть они выполняли работу фиксеров практически для него. Ну и, конечно, это важно, потому что некоторых успехов они добились. Они смогли организовать ему ряд встреч действительно с людьми.
They connected Giuliani with Ukraine's top prosecutor, Yuri Lutsenko. Giuliani met with him in Poland and again in New York. To officials in Kyiv, it was highly irregular.
Giuliani never asked for a meeting with any foreign policy officials here in Ukraine, neither with me nor with someone else, which is, I believe, remarkable, because he tried to contact many people here in Ukraine.
If I were to, to speak with Giuliani, for example, before these meetings happened with Lutsenko, I would told pick the right people. Lutsenko is not the right person to have communication with. He has own agenda.
U.S. officials were also wary of Lutsenko.
I think Mr. Lutsenko, in my estimation, and I said this to Marie Giuliani when I met with him, was interested in preserving his own position. He wanted to avoid being fired by a new government in order to prevent prosecution of himself.
Here's why Kurt is wrong. With all due respect, he's a great diplomat. He doesn't know anything about investigating. Doesn't know anything about crime.
Giuliani connected Lutsenko with John Solomon, a sympathetic journalist, and a series of explosive stories followed. Ukrainian officials had apparently worked against Trump in 2016. Ambassador Yovanovitch was part of the conspiracy. None of it was true, as Lutsenko would later admit, but the claims took on a life of their own.
Our ambassador there was working for Hillary Clinton, working for the Democrats and for George Soros.
Mr. President, the Ukraine is offering this evidence to the United States.
And the president was listening.
It sounds like big stuff. It sounds like very interesting with Ukraine.
In April of 2019, Trump took action. Yovanovitch got the call from a colleague in the middle of the night.
She said I needed to come home immediately, get on the next plane to the U.S., and I asked her why. And she said she wasn't sure, but there were concerns about my security.
These concerns took on new weight after Lev Parnas turned over his text messages to Congress. They suggest the ambassador was under surveillance at the time by an American named Robert Hyde, who appeared to be updating Parnas on her movements. Hyde and Parnas have said it was a joke, but Ukrainian police are investigating.
With the sidelining of Yovanovitch, the stage was set for the establishment of an irregular channel in which Giuliani and later others could advance the president's personal and political interests.
By then, the president's interests were changing. He was no longer worried about the special counsel inquiry, which had hung over the White House for nearly 2 years.
What happens in here is the Mueller investigation ends. The president is actually fairly happy with the results for him.
It was a complete and total exoneration.
Trump turned his attention to 2020.
I stand before you to officially launch my campaign for a second term as President of the United States.
But his lawyer kept his eyes on Ukraine.
Giuliani doesn't end these efforts. I think by then he's already in too deep. He has started to kind of shift and talk less about the 2016 election and more about Joe Biden.
Look, Sean, it's a case that is crying out to be investigated. Biden's son took millions of dollars out of the Ukraine.
Joe Biden had long been touted as Trump's most serious threat to re-election, and in April, he launched his campaign.
We are in a battle for America's soul. I really believe that, and we have to restore it.
While Biden had been in charge of U.S. policy in Ukraine, his son Hunter took a lucrative board seat at Burisma, a Ukrainian gas company that was being investigated for corruption.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
Some U.S. officials say it made them nervous, but it didn't cross a line.
I raised my concern that Hunter Biden's status as a board member could create the perception of a conflict of interests. Let me be clear, however, I did not witness any effort by any U.S. official to shield Burisma from scrutiny.
But Giuliani's contacts in Ukraine had told him a different story, and there was an old video of Biden that seemed to back it up.
Look, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired.
He's leveraging our money to get the guy fired that's investigating his son.
The arrogance of that is astounding, Sean.
In fact, the investigation into Hunter Biden's company had long been stalled, and the prosecutor had been fired for failing to pursue corruption cases.
Certainly the narrative about Biden and Hunter Biden was out there for the taking for anybody who wanted to weaponize it. And I'm sure there's no shortage of Ukrainians who are seeking influence with the Trump administration who were all too happy to repeat it.
Look at Joe Biden. He calls them and says, don't you dare prosecute if you don't fire this prosecutor. The prosecutor was after his son. Can you imagine if I did that?
Ukraine was busy holding its own election that spring.
We're fighting to drain the swamp.
It would soon find itself at the center of an American political scandal. Volodymyr Zelensky had been an actor and played the role of Ukraine's president on a popular TV show. In 2019, he made a real run for the presidency and campaigned against corruption. In April, he won in a landslide.
Slava Ukraini!
But there was no honeymoon for Zelensky. The economy was struggling. The conflict with Russia was still grinding on, and Ukrainians were still dying. In need of a lifeline, his advisors sought a White House visit.
I wanted our relationship with the United States to get stronger, because I've seen that the situation in the world is changing. And it is changing not in our favor. At the end of the day, what I wanted is for both presidents to meet as soon as possible.
But there were things Trump wanted first. He tapped a hotel magnate and campaign donor to lead his team in Ukraine.
We have what are called the Three Amigos, and we've been tasked with sort of overseeing the Ukraine-U.S. relationship.
Gordon Sondland would later admit there was a fourth member of the group, one with no official title.
If we wanted to get anything done with Ukraine, it was apparent to us we needed to talk to Rudy.
Right. You understood that Mr. Giuliani spoke for the president, correct?
That's correct.
In May, Giuliani sent a letter to Zelensky. He was clear about his role. "I am private counsel to President Donald J. Trump," it read. "With his knowledge and consent, I request a meeting with you."
The president's personal attorney heading to Eastern Europe.
When Giuliani's plans became public, he was forced to cancel his trip to Ukraine.
In order to remove any political suggestion, I will step back and I'll just watch it unfold.
But Giuliani was still shaping U.S. policy behind the scenes. When Sondland met with a Zelensky advisor in Brussels, he made clear that Trump felt wronged by Ukraine and wanted answers.
He told me that there is a feeling that it is unfair, right? What happened before is unfair. So there is this discomfort that needs to be sorted out.
Publicly, Trump was signaling that he was open to help in 2020, no matter where it came from.
If somebody called from a country, Norway, "We have information on your opponent." Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
Ukrainian officials were nervous.
Back channels are fine. It's how politics actually works, whether we like it or not. But when such back channels start in basically dominating anything, it's where the problem comes. Here, in the case of Giuliani, it's what could be called kind of shadow politics.
In the shadows, American aid was put on hold. It would take months for the Ukrainians to find out.
Politico's scoop, quote, "Trump holds up Ukraine military aid meant to confront Russia."
Politico? National security chief in Ukraine, learned from Politico.
It's a very difficult situation. I don't know whether everybody in DC understands how important this feeling that we have such an ally in fighting against Russian aggression like the US.
With the White House meeting in the balance, a call was arranged for July 25th between Trump and Zelensky.
This may be the most important phone call any president has ever had. It's the only time when a single phone call has, in many respects, led to the impeachment of a president.
I was concerned by the call. It is improper for the President of the United States to demand a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen and a political opponent.
The next day, another call. Sondland phoned Trump from an upscale restaurant in Kyiv. An aide overheard their conversation.
I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it, adding that President Zelensky will do anything you ask him to do.
The president asks Zelensky to work with Rudy Giuliani, and days later, Giuliani is in Madrid meeting with a top aide to Zelensky to talk about these exact topics.
I asked for only one thing from them. I don't ask for a result. I asked for an investigation.
I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Biden. It's a very simple answer.
It appears as though Zelensky is preparing to issue a statement like that, to say he's going to open the investigations. And then the whistleblower complaint comes through.
The whistleblower complaint at the center of an impeachment inquiry against President Trump accuses the White House of participating in what some are calling a cover-up.
president welcomed foreign interference in our elections in 2016. He demanded it for 2020. Then he got caught.
I know the president said that he can get away with anything he wants to. I come today to tell you that no, he cannot.
It is an abuse of power. It's your abuse of power. It is about a personal political vendetta.
Article 1 is adopted.
We did nothing wrong, nothing whatsoever. This was just an excuse.
President Trump was impeached for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress.
Article 2 is adopted.
Tonight's vote in the full House of Representatives makes Donald Trump just the third American president to be impeached.
The United States is still a role model for us of how rule of law works. So don't make our mistakes.
Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman are awaiting trial in New York, charged with violating U.S. election laws. They have both pleaded not guilty, and Parnas is speaking out.
President Trump knew exactly what was going on. He was aware of all of my movements. I wouldn't do anything without the consent of Rudy Giuliani or the president. I was on the ground doing their work.
Collusion, corruption, bribery.
Giuliani is still building his case. In December 2019, along with a film crew from a conservative media network, he returned to Ukraine.
She says he has a lot of good information. I have not spoken to him about that information, but Rudy, as you know, has been one of the great crime fighters of the last 50 years.
Am I surprised that he's in the middle of everything and could bring down a president? Absolutely not. I think it's pure Giuliani.
The president's personal attorney, what is your personal mission? What's your mission?
To disrupt the world.